This is Prince George's County Executive Rashawn Baker, and you're listening to the Maryland Crabs Podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's Thursday. It's time for the Maryland Crabs again. How are you, Tim?
I am back from Aruba.
You're looking all tanned and everything else. And do you have any thong lines?
I have eschewed my pasty Irishness in favor of easy living and drinking.
The sunburnt.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. What did Conan O'Brien say? He said, "Put an Irish guy in the sun is like putting a fork in the microwave." It was, but I don't burn that well, but it was burn that much. But it was great, man. It was awesome.
Aruba's a nice island.
Yeah, and so
did you fly in? I didn't get beat.
So that whole United thing happened. I think. Well, I guess the day after we got there, which was just awesome, because that was the guy, the doctor who got dragged off and beaten.
Dr. Dow, I'm not getting off.
Yeah, so I'm flying Dr. Dow Airlines next week. But you know what? Here's what gets me about that. It wasn't the incident, and I'll talk about that in a second. There's like a certain kind of internet troll that comes out now that everybody was united in their outrage. Everyone was livid, and they should be. I don't care if he was wrong or people say he should have gotten up or he should have obeyed them. I think this was just people were just being tired of being treated like absolute crap by the airlines and just being abused and misused. And
well, they have for years.
Well, yeah. So I think I was firmly on his side when it came to what happened. But what got me was the number of people, and it wasn't many, but you have almost these trolls that are contrarian, that you had a handful of people saying, you know what, he was wrong, or he should have. I'm like, can we all just be outraged together on this one? Because they were wrong. The airlines, there's a great article I posted on my Facebook. It was called, I think, I don't have it here. It was called Managed
Chaos, misery,
or managed misery, or something like that. So the theory is that if I'm going to sell you a hamburger, and so here's the price for a hamburger, and then I'm going to say, hey, do you want bacon and cheese? And you'll say, oh yeah, okay, well that's an extra buck, and you say, okay, that's great. But then what the airlines do is they said, do you want a hamburger? And you say, yeah. And they said, well, do you want it cooked to order? That's going to cost extra. And if you want mustard and ketchup, that costs extra. And you want sesame seeds on your bun, so everything is extra, so that you have the same situation. They create miserable situations, and you have to pay to get back to normal, back to just your normal comfort. And it's not a free market. You have 4 airlines that control 80% of the flight industry. Yeah, and it's you don't have a choice. It's not a free market.
Well, you look in Europe, and you've got Ryanair, which is a true budget carrier.
Yeah, but they got a pretty shitty reputation.
Well,
but
they do fine. That's what they are.
But yeah, that's what people say. Going, yeah, it's going to be crap, but I'm going to spend. And also, it's if you're in Europe, you don't have a flight that's more than 2 hours.
No, and you're paying for crap. I mean, you could also fly British Airways and get the service that you want, and that is a true free market. I mean, I look at that in the restaurants in Annapolis. I mean, there's plenty of restaurants that are just very mediocre, and they've never been anything other than mediocre, and that's what they trade on.
And they charge a premium because they're soaking the tourists. But the tourists
depends if they got a water view or not. But well, yeah, no. I mean, there were people that were outraged.
They should be outraged. I think good collective outrage is good every once in a while. I really do. I mean, the Cecil the Lion thing was a little over the top, but this one I think was all for good. I mean, I think they're not going to change. I mean, no one's going to boycott United. They're going to promise they will.
Well, they can try, but that's not going to do anything.
Yeah, and United is no worse off than the other ones, really.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of outrage, I'm outraged.
You're always outraged.
I am. Well, no,
is it about the guy on the plane who was dragged off?
I'm just a miserable fart. I'm in my 50s, so it goes with the territory. But
you got snippy on Facebook. I've never seen you get snippy on Facebook.
We'll get to that in 1 second. This episode is going to be really cool because we got Congressman Anthony Brown coming up. But what I'm miffed at right now is that we don't have enough 5-star ratings.
Oh yeah.
Or comments. Oh yeah. On iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher Radio or iHeartRadio.
So
I
blame that on you.
Okay, that's fine.
I just don't. It's not going to be my fault.
Yeah, so. No, well, I put my comment in there. But no, seriously, if you're listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, do go to iTunes, sign in there, give us a rating, and don't give us a 5-star rating unless you think we're 5-star. I mean, I'm not looking to buck the system.
I am. I'm a system bucker.
But just give us a rating and actually give us a review. We thrive on
praise.
We thrive on praise. We thrive on criticism.
Attention.
As well.
No, you thrive on criticism. I don't take criticism well. Someone goes, "Hey, can I be honest? Can I give you some constructive criticism?" I'm like, "Well, no. you could piss off. How about that?"
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, but we're everywhere now. We're on. I had my new Alexa, and we played one of your crab cakes the other day. I said, "Play the Maryland Crabs," and boom, that was there.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere you get your podcast, we are there now.
And John just discovered how to get us onto YouTube after I investigated for a minute and decided it was too hard, and then on Facebook as well. So we're kind of rolling here.
Yeah, and we're getting a number of emails. And actually, we had an email that was sent to us that we talked to Congressman Brown about.
Yeah. So we had one that came too late for us to talk to him about. We got it after we had met with him.
Right. We got that.
What was his name?
That was Vern.
Vern. Yeah, I like that guy's great. Vern. Hey, Vern. Hi, Vern.
That's it. But yeah, no, we touched a little bit on that with Congressman Brown. But that was. But my outrage is that we need some more reviews because reviews do help us in the whole iTunes podcast universe as far as getting us ratings and moving us up on different lists and whatnot there. So please do that. And if you ever need to get a hold of us anywhere, you've got info@themarylandcrabs.com. You can catch all of the episodes all of the time just by going to our website, themarylandcrabs.com. And do this whole Twitter thing at MD Crabs Podcast. And email, I think we said that, info@themarylandcrabs. So there's all the ways to get in touch with us. And please do get in touch with us because your ideas are what really sort of helps us guide where the hell we want to go because we just otherwise drive aimlessly around Upper Marlboro and Largo.
My ego is such that when we get messages going, I love your podcast, but as soon as I hit the button, I'm like, and go on to the next one.
delete.
That's not true.
But talk about outrage, man. And here's my other outrage is the last week's episode with Jeff Jacobson. He is the developer with Solstice Partners.
I'm going to be honest with you, and Jeff was a great guy, and Jeff was nice, but it's one of those things that sometimes when we're doing a podcast, when you're into it, you're like, I don't know if this is going well. I don't know how this is going to be perceived. I don't know if it's too much of a niche. So halfway through that, I thought to myself, you know what? We're going to lose a lot of people who live outside of Annapolis, and maybe we did, but the people who lived inside Annapolis, and specifically Eastport.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, we're addressing things that are outside of the city as well, and sometimes certainly we can.
No. I mean, Jeb, but I'm talking this particular episode, and that was. But I didn't expect the
outrage
that came. John was accused of being paid by.
Oh my gosh,
it was
horrible. Yeah. Hey, shout out to Denise on Facebook, who turned around and told me that I had no business talking about Eastport stuff because I don't live in Eastport, and I don't walk in Eastport, and I don't shop in Eastport. I'm like, wow, she really kind of knows what I do and don't do. And the ironic thing was that as she was probably typing that, I was walking back from the post office, which is right where the development is planned to go.
That is ironic.
And Kathleen Booth...
Like rain on your wedding day.
Yeah, Kathleen Booth passed me on the road, and she honked, and we waved and whatnot. And she said, this is... we were texting a little bit later, and she said, oh, this is hysterical. I mean,
yeah, so it was on the Eastport Neighborhood Forum. If you folks aren't on, that's probably the liveliest area of Facebook when it comes to Annapolis. And that's where a lot of the good debates go. And there was... So I think... pretty much in light of what we talked about with Jeff, I think what he said was kind of true, is that you had most people seemed like they were in favor of it, and then you had some very vocal people who were very not in favor of it. And we're going to be talking with the developer of the Village of Providence Point, which was, of course, the Crystal Spring development until a couple of weeks ago. And that was something where, I'm not anti-development, I'm not pro-development. I have my problems with the Crystal Spring development, but I was in favor of what they're talking about in Eastport. And like John said, I go through there probably 2, 3, 4 times a day. So
I do think it's a good project. Does it need some changes? Perhaps.
And I was corrected several times by Jess Packler because we said
she's bossy.
We love Jess, but she'd said something about I'd said something about they're not in a food desert, and she disagreed with me.
They're not what?
In a food desert. Mm-hmm. And I disagreed, because she said, we're 1.5 miles away from Giant. And I said, and I snorted, if you can do that in a text, and said, that's not true. It's not a food desert. But I guess according to, not the FDA, but
USDA.
It's USDA.
Yeah.
If you live, they have very specific parameters as to what is a food desert. So I guess technically they are in a food desert.
We are a food desert, but that's kind of BS. But
you hear that, Jess? He just called you out.
Yeah, she definitely will. But this, there were a lot of people that were opposed to traffic. But I've never really seen, except when there's a backup on Forest Drive or an accident or something like that, the bridge is, broken or something like that. I've never seen traffic be horrible in Eastport.
I don't think it is. But here one person but they made me think, one person said, well, if you're trying to take a left to get out, you can left forever. And yeah, sure, you can, but I would probably sneak through to the light over at the shopping center at that point. But that's the only time I don't think there's a problem. And you've kind of swung me to Forest Drive, is that Forest Drive, I think that Forest Drive has the potential to be hellacious. Like if something happens, the entire artery shuts down.
Sure.
On a day-to-day...
Well, the city shuts down.
I don't have to wait more than a cycle to get through a light. So you brought me over to your way of thinking, sort of. But we'll talk to them a couple days, actually. We're going to drive out to Montgomery County.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to speak with Providence Point? Village at Providence Point? Village of Providence. Crystal Spring. That'll be a difficult one for me to call something other than what
we're going to have to write that down. You're probably just correcting us.
But yeah, there's also another...
And I'm going to tell them about that meeting I had with their guy who was... right before Christmas, that was supposed to alleviate my fears, and he was kind of a dick. Great.
The more informed you are, as opposed to coming out with crazy things. I mean, the main arguments against the thing where it's too big. And, I mean, some people were saying, well, yeah, what's to stop somebody from buying 4 houses and building a 5-story skyscraper? Well, that's residential. This is zoned commercial. This is able to have something bigger and something commercial as opposed to an apartments. You couldn't put apartments in certain places.
Well, plus I think people, I tend to do it too. You kind of romanticize, someone said, I like gravel. You said, well, have your gravel parking lot.
My little wise ass comment was like, well, enjoy your abandoned movie theater in the gravel parking lot.
Well, someone said, they have this movie theater over in Bowie that you can recline and it's great. It would be a home run here. If it was going to be a home run here, someone would have done it. And I feel the same way with the Samaras property. Is that that's where the old CNC Liquors is, and there's 5 acres back there, and it's derelict properties and that are back there. One burned down a couple of years ago. I'd like to see something nice done with it. You don't have to be pro development to want to see something useful done with a property.
No.
I have my reservations with the Providence Point thing still.
Well, one thing that with Eastport Landing and Jeff had mentioned is the grocery store, and this sort of ties back to Jessica Packler's comments about the food desert. He said, we've looked at tons of people that want to put a grocery store. There have been 2 grocery stores in there that have failed. And whether they're not supported, whether it's just the math doesn't work as far as square footage or parking or whatever, and my bet would be that it'd be competition. I've got a friend of mine that was the general manager of the Wegmans when it opened up.
Oh, name dropper.
And he was like, hey, why don't you shop at us? I'm like, I love Wegmans. I really do. My problem is that I have to pass 8 grocery stores to get to Wegmans, one of which I walk to.
I complain nonstop about Giant. I don't like the fact that you have like one cashier.
And you go back.
And the deli, they hate slicing thin. And the produce can be... I still go.
What about the cars in the red zone?
They're the worst human beings ever.
Well, if you've not listened to the episode with Jeff Jacobson from Eastport Landing, which is last week, go back, check it out, iTunes, wherever else you get your podcast. You can go to the Eastport Neighborhood Forum page, check that out as well. And what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Congressman Anthony Brown, former lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland, who represents now the 4th District, which is a really gerrymandered district.
Well, they all are in Maryland.
As they are. Hey, welcome to Maryland.
Yeah, I think his district includes parts of Prince George's County, Davidsville, Edgewater, parts of West Virginia, parts of Michigan.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
Oklahoma.
It's kind of like the southwest side of Prince George County comes up, and I think there's like a little sliver. I think there's like half a lane of Route 1 as it goes past Jessup, and then it comes back. It's got Severna Park. It's got Gambrels, Davidsonville. Does not have Annapolis. That's John Sarbanes, which has the even more gerrymandered district.
Yeah, there's like a bridge and a ladder in that one.
And we're gonna talk to Congressman Sarbanes too as well.
Oh, here's the funny thing. So we're recording this after we recorded just about an hour after we met with the congressman. And listen carefully when John says something about his district and he calls it gerrymandered. I was watching the congressman. His expression froze for a second, and he just glared at you, and you didn't catch it.
Yeah,
I love when people are mad at you.
We also talk about the gubernatorial election, and he also throws out some shade on Governor O'Malley and 2020. But we'll be right back.
You don't understand what shade means, do you?
Don't miss AAMC's Denim and Diamonds Bash, an evening to remember with a cocktail buffet, silent auction, and dancing, all to support expanding mental health at AAMC. We need your support to help us double our county's inventory of mental health beds, allowing for the care of 900 patients a year right here in Anne Arundel County. Tickets available at aamcdenimanddiamonds.org. Special thanks to our presenting sponsors, the Chesapeake Bay Hawks, M&T Bank, and our platinum sponsors, Aerotech, AAMC medical staff, BB&T, Comcast, Homestead Gardens, Ken's Creative Kitchen, Tech Systems, What's Up Media, and 1031 WRNR.
Spring is waiting outside your door, and it's time to make your lawn and garden beautiful again with Homestead Gardens. Their experts will show you how to make a safe lawn for kids and pets using the area's largest selection of organic lawn solutions. Share family fun and satisfaction growing food, flowers, and shrubs together. Visit Homestead Gardens in Davidsonville or Severna Park, Maryland, and go to homesteadgardens.com for deals, events, and workshops. Live life outdoors this season with Homestead Gardens.
Hey, we're here in Prince George County in lovely Upper Marlboro with Congressman Anthony Brown from the 4th District, who is a familiar name to everybody, who used to be our lieutenant governor under Governor Martin O'Malley, who is now sitting in Washington, D.C. How are you today, Congressman?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's wonderful having you here in our Largo office on Apollo Drive. We're really excited. We opened this office a few months ago to fulfill our number one pledge on the campaign trail, which is to deliver quality constituent services to the residents of the 4th Congressional District.
The paint still smells fresh.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
It's a beehive of activity here, too. I mean, it's just people in and out. It's like a subway station here.
Yeah, well, as you know, a typical month, 3 weeks in Washington and then 1 week in the district. They used to call it a recess, but that's a misnomer because there's no vacation associated with the 1 week in the district.
How nice is that not to have to travel, too?
Yeah, I live
guy.
close. I live close, and we have an opportunity to meet with mayors and municipal leaders, civic leaders, constituents. It's less hustle and bustle than the schedule in Washington, D.C., so I often encourage constituents who want to meet with me personally to do it in the district office because there's less things pulling on you.
So do you have any other district offices?
Yes, we have 2 offices. So this is our, I guess, what is referred to in Washington as our flagship office, but no more or less important than our second office, which is in Anne Arundel County. It's on Riva Road. We worked with County Executive Steve Shue in Anne Arundel to locate some space that's co-located with a county office.
County office park at 2666 Riva Road.
Exactly.
4 or 2 or one of them.
Yep. So we just got the keys to that about a week or so ago. There's still a few kind of technical things that need to be worked out, but we should be doing our grand opening soon. And one of the campaign pledges I made is that we will serve the residents of Anne Arundel County from Anne Arundel County. So we look forward to opening that up and delivering those services real soon.
Which is great because you've got a little bit of a gerrymandered district. You've got that little sliver that comes up, and then you've got Anne Arundel County and then PG County. So that's always very good to hear. I guess the one thing you're a freshman congressman. I mean, you're the freshman of the freshmanist, if you will. I mean, you won your election last November, and you've been in office for.
In fact, we celebrated our 100th day last Thursday, so I'm over the 100-day mark. And it's been a whirlwind of activity. We hit the ground running with, I think the issue that's been biggest, visibility and has taken up a great deal of our time is the Affordable Care Act and the Republicans' effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with a pretty much of a substandard alternative. So we've been spending a lot of time on that one.
All right. So the criticism of that. I mean, we're rehashing what's been kind of played out in the press for the last few months, but the criticism was that most Republicans were elected on a promise for the last 8 years to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and when they had the opportunity, There was nothing there. And what Speaker Ryan had come up with at that point was essentially Obamacare Light, which is what the Freedom Caucus accused them of or warned them not to do, which is what they did. So we thought this was a dead issue, but apparently Speaker Ryan said last week that it was going to be back on the agenda in the next upcoming months. Do you think that it has a shot of being repealed this time, seeing that they're not taking out the key elements that really ticked off the Freedom Caucus, which was the stumbling block moving into this?
Well, I think what the Republicans learned is that it's much more difficult to actually govern, to assume the responsibility of governing, than to spew rhetoric and criticism about what you see when others govern. I mean, we all know that over the last 6 or 7 years, the Republicans passed, I think 50-plus repeal measures, knowing that each and every one of them either wouldn't make it through the Senate, or if they did, they would be vetoed by President Obama. So there was not a lot of thought put into.
It was all symbolic. Right?
It's symbolic. So now, given the reins and the responsibility, a Republican in the White House, Republicans who control both the Senate and the House, they were confronted with the reality of governing, which is difficult. And in order to do what even President Trump said, which is health care for everyone, that's not easy. And the Republican proposal demonstrated that.
Well, they changed that from health care for everyone to access to insurance. That's a fine point when you're giving a speech, but there's a world of difference between health care and access to insurance.
Sure. Look, I mean, you can say that everybody can walk through the doors of Nordstrom's to buy something, but if you can't afford, you've got access. But if you can't afford what's on the rack, then what good does that do? So, we Democrats recognize, and we have since day one, that the Affordable Care Act, like so many major programs initiated in federal government, whether you go as far back as Medicaid or Medicare, even Social Security, you have to come back and improve it. And the Affordable Care Act was in need of, and still is, of improvement. How do you make prescription drug costs lower? How do you continue to reduce the costs of premiums and out-of-pocket expenses? But the Republican proposal certainly didn't hit the mark.
So here's what's interesting. John and I were talking about this on the ride over, is that we're in uncharted waters as far as the presidency. Everyone's a freshman congressman. I don't care how long you've been in at this point, because we're not sure exactly what to make of this. But ideologically, President Trump is not a Republican. I mean, he's been a Democrat for years. So I think the Republicans obviously see him as a vehicle to move forward some of their key proposals that they've been looking for years. But I think you saw that schism and the separation with him and the Republicans and the Freedom Caucus in general. And he said that he would consider working with Democrats at the next go-round when it comes to health care. Is that beyond the pale to say, maybe there's a way to pull him away from the Republican Party? Because he's certainly a Republican in name, but I mean, ideologically, he doesn't have a fixed ideology.
Look, I think the Democrats have always taken the position that if we can work with people who are willing to expand access to quality care, that if we can continue to reduce the costs of health care, then we'll work with anyone and everyone. But
because his core constituents, the ones who really elected him, you look at, I hate to use the flyover states and the Rust Belt, et cetera, all the other terms that people have used to describe the election, but those are people that since the election have increasingly shown a favorable attitude towards the Affordable Care Act. I think it's around 54% approval rating right now. So these are people who rely on the very Obamacare that they were railing against. So, I mean, it would behoove him to kind of work with the Republican or the Democrats at this point, because that's what he wants is not just access, but
it was often you saw it on television, you saw it at town halls that Republicans were hosting, where a constituent would say, yeah, go ahead and repeal Obamacare, but just don't touch my health care.
Right.
Because many didn't understand that so many Americans benefit from the Affordable Care Act, whether you call it Obamacare or not. When parents can continue to cover their kids up to age 26, that's because of the Affordable Care Act. When we eliminated pre-existing conditions and guaranteed issue, and that's true whether you're on the individual market or or in an employer-sponsored plan. That's the Affordable Care Act. So as one of the things I think we did well as Democrats beginning in November and certainly ramped it up in January was our education and outreach to the American public of what was really at stake with the repeal, the proposed repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And that's why you saw not just Democrats, but independents and Republicans rising up across the country, taking on members of Congress of every party, saying do not repeal those provisions that are going to degrade the quality of health care that I have access to.
So one of the fears that people had was that since that they had lost the vote, or well, didn't vote, but they lost the battle to repeal the Affordable Care Act, that there'd be an effort on the Trump administration's part to sabotage the Affordable Care Act so that it would fail before people said that it's in a spiral, and the CBO disagrees with that. But President Trump announced a few days ago that they're going to continue the subsidies to the insurance companies that are participating. So that's pretty much an about face. So,
right,
so
but
for now,
the sabotage
really
is still in, though, because the president signed an executive order on January 20th, one of the first three that he signed. One of them was the hiring freeze in the federal government. The other was to sort of rescind the Obama administration's efforts to make home ownership a little bit more affordable by reducing premium mortgage insurance premiums. But the other one was to basically say to federal agencies that have regulatory jurisdiction over the Affordable Care Act to either discontinue or to relax your enforcement mechanisms over provisions dealing with the Affordable Care Act. So how that plays out, I don't know.
You mean the mandate, or is that?
Well, the mandate. I mean, so you're not going to see the IRS aggressively pursuing those individuals that do not have health insurance and are now subject to paying it's a very modest penalty.
Right.
I don't think you'll see the IRS bring any enforcement actions.
No.
But even in the other areas where, for example, insurance companies have to spend a certain ratio of their premium dollars on the delivery of health care, or else they have to return the money to the insured, I don't think that you're going to see an aggressive enforcement of that. So I do think that until the president stands up and says the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land, and until it's changed, we are going to enforce it vigorously. I still think that what happens is there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. Insurers like Humana and others will continue to look for ways to pull out of the market, and locally, projects like the Prince George's County Regional Medical Center are in jeopardy because of the uncertainty of the level of uncompensated care and whether or not the numbers would add up to deliver a new medical center to Prince George's County. So I still think that the sabotage is in by the Trump administration, and they need to do more work to try to stabilize the market.
That's interesting. I'll tell you, let's shift gears a little bit here. And one thing that's sort of near and dear to everybody in certainly your constituency, and we're down in Annapolis with the Maryland Crabs, the Chesapeake Bay and the APA, and President Trump has pretty much gutted the programs for that. I mean, where do we go from here?
Look, I've been concerned about the Chesapeake Bay for as long as I've been in public office, and I was first elected in 1998. I was sworn into the Maryland General Assembly in 1999. Long before I was elected, there were goals that were established for cleaning and restoring the bay. A lot of that commitment was made by state government. Governor Glenn Denning was a real champion of the environment.
And it was working.
And it was working. It was slow, but it was working. Chesapeake Bay Foundation, a host of other environmental groups coming together, working with the farming community, everybody identifying what their roles and their responsibilities were to protecting and preserving the bay. Enter Martin O'Malley, who I believe was one of the best environmental governors in modern history in Maryland, and we began to make progress. You started to see a decline in the number of dead zones in the Chesapeake Bay. We started to see see oyster restoration, blue crab restoration, and we're moving in the right direction. When the Obama administration came into office, they redoubled, re-energized the EPA, recognizing that it was a regional approach. Maryland couldn't do it alone. You needed Virginia working with the District of Columbia, working with Pennsylvania, with New York. Had to be a collaborative regional effort. And we finally had an EPA that was saying, hey, okay, we're gonna work with everyone, and we're gonna bring everyone to the table, and we'll enforce some regulations. And now you see an administration that is backtracking. And the proposal, although we have not yet seen the formal Trump budget, which should be coming in about a month or so, but what they call the skinny budget, the proposed budget, shows a zeroing out, a $78 million reduction in the Chesapeake Bay program. And that will go, that won't do a whole lot to balance the federal budget, but it'll be
a hell of a lot for the Bay.
Oh, it'll be a big loss.
That's
to
what,
the Bay.
15 Mar-a-Lago trips.
Yeah, I mean, if he's doing, I mean, the numbers vary, but if it's on the $3 million a weekend, and he's already been down there, I don't know, 10, 15 weekends.
What's a weekend cost you here in Largo?
A few bucks, I think, to turn the lights on.
You got Applebee's up at the corner.
Right.
You're okay.
So that's disappointing. And I mean, look, it's my hope that we'll get some moderate Republicans that will see the wisdom of investments in environmental programs and investments at NIH, investments in programs like Meals on Wheels and Head Start. And while there may be some reductions in all of those programs, I have no doubt about that, because I do believe that President Trump will try to appeal to his more conservative base. I'm hopeful. I get that hope is not a strategy, but I'm hopeful that we're not going to see the draconian cuts that we've seen in the skinny budget.
So that's interesting to me, is that these cuts are coming because of the increase of $58 billion to the military, or to defense, I should say. So this is where we are in the Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the country. So when you see a huge cut to the Chesapeake Bay program, it's very obvious to us. Whereas if you live in the Midwest or somewhere where you're only getting smaller dollars for smaller programs, it's not as obvious. But it's a shock to those of us who live on the Bay or in Maryland in general. But you, as a veteran and as a current Army reservist, Colonel Army reservist, you have a perspective to the military that's probably different. Do you see that the increases that the president is making to the defense budget is something that's necessary? And if it is necessary, should it come to the cost of other governmental programs? I mean, let's say that if it was across the board, so it wasn't a $78 million reduction to the Bay. Let's say it was all of a sudden it was like $50 million, which is a lot less, but you can probably work with that. But you probably have an interesting perspective.
Look, I share views that are similar to most senior military leaders, whether you're speaking with an admiral in the Navy or a general in the Army or the Marines. And while we all believe that the United States needs to make sufficient investments in our national defense if we're going to ensure warfighter readiness, if we're going to rebalance the force, and the force is in need of rebalance, if we're going to expand the capacity of the Department of Defense, you have to invest more money. But even when I speak to senior leaders, and I have an opportunity on the House Armed Services Committee to do that almost every day, none of them propose doing that at the expense of domestic programming. I was on the USS Nimitz about 3 weeks ago, and they are underway. They are in a pre-deployment training period. And I looked at these young sailors, on average probably 23 years old, doing things that our country's asked them to do that fewer and fewer Americans are willing to do on any given day. It's important work. It's potentially dangerous. And I said, we're committed to what you do. Because you are participating in the defense of this nation. And because of a strong defense, coupled with robust diplomacy, coupled with a significant investment in development activities around the world, we are the most prosperous nation in the world, and I believe that. Prosperity measured not just by dollars, but prosperity measured by religious tolerance, by our cultural richness, by the educational systems we have. We are second to none around the world, and we are not perfect. And we are so because we're willing to invest in the men and women who defend our country. But if we're going to maintain that prosperity, we need to continue to invest in good schools and safe neighborhoods and clean environment and access to health care. And when I look at a flag officer in the Navy and I say what I just said, they nod their head in affirmation. They say, that's right. We don't want to see an increased investment at the Department of Defense if it's going to come at the expense of good schools or a 29% reduction that's being proposed for the State Department. That's USAID money. That's money in diplomacy. So this is a great nation. We're prosperous. We've got to be able to do it all.
But it's also, if you're looking at that money, does it go to truly making us safer, or is it just to pad a defense contractor's bottom line? For example, I'm using the example of the Abrams tanks, or something that the generals are telling us, don't send us any more Abrams tanks. We don't need them. I was reading an article the other day, Bill Schuster, who's one of my least favorites. I guess he's chairman of the Transportation Committee, but he wrote many letters in support of the Patriot missile because he's invested in that, whether it be contributions or what have you. But we were using the Patriot missile during Desert Storm, and what was that, 28 years ago? Does that make us safer if we have more Patriot missiles?
Sure. There are plenty of examples of major weapon systems that cost a lot of money that we need to revisit and maybe even discontinue. And whether you're talking about the Abrams tank, and I can't speak specifically to that, but there's certainly a host of examples.
I certainly can't. But
yeah, but there are a host of examples where the military services are saying we don't need any more. Yet for other reasons, Congress continues to push those.
Well, the optics
systems.
are good on that. Because it makes us, we want to keep us safe. Don't you want to keep us safe?
Right,
So all of a sudden,
but there's only a certain number of Abrams tanks that you need to stay safe. Now, on the other hand, though, I think most would agree that right now we have 10 U.S. aircraft carriers, and now the goal is to go to 12. And that's, I think most people would agree that's something we ought to do.
I think China has, 2?
They have 2, but, if we want to compare the United States to China, I'm going to live in the United States any given day. Because,
But they have awesome Chinese food, so if you want to think about it,
we project power around the globe with our carrier strike forces, and we're able to bring the fight abroad, so we can reduce the likelihood of that fight here at home. So there are some systems that I think are worthwhile investing in. There are others that we could probably discontinue. There's probably a level of waste and abuse that we can wring out of the system, although I don't think that you're going to achieve multi-billion-dollar savings by reducing waste and abuse. I think it's a convenient way to suggest that we need to reduce defense spending. And I'll just use my own example as lieutenant governor, and where a state budget pales in comparison with the federal government. Time and again, you would hear critics say, "Oh, I can reduce state government spending by reducing waste, fraud, and abuse." Governor O'Malley and I spent a lot of time in doing that, and we found some savings, but not the kinds of savings that avoid difficult decisions when it comes to balancing budgets.
One of the greatest things with Governor O'Malley with the cuts to, I guess it was the teacher's pension, and they were all fired up. And I remember the rally, Lawyers Mall, and they had the pitchforks, and they were ready to hang him. And I could see him watching out of the government house, out of the window. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, he's coming up on stage, and he explains why he needed to do this. And they were bringing him up and cheering him.
They were carrying him around on their shoulders.
And I'm going, what the hell just happened?
That Irish charm.
I think when you avoid the debate, when you avoid the discussion, then there's uncertainty, there's animosity, it creates difficulty, if not impossibility, to reach consensus. I think one of the things that Governor O'Malley and I did very well We sat down with the stakeholders, often that were disagreeing with one another, disagreeing with our initial positions. We explained why we were doing what we were doing, what we thought the end game was, the results, the benefits, short-term and long-term. You never got universal agreement around the table, but you did get a better understanding of what we were trying to accomplish. And if everybody can walk away from the table a little bit disappointed with what the decision is, you've probably struck a good balance.
Just describe my household.
Well, it makes all the sense in the world. You don't have to agree with it, but at least you know where you're coming from there. You've talked about O'Malley a couple times. You said he was one of the best environmental governors ever, and certainly you're probably one of the few people that, aside from his wife, Katie, and his kids, that have the inside scoop on that. He's obviously preparing for a run on 2020. You think
he's just in Iowa? You
think he's got a shot?
Yeah, it's hard to say whether anyone has a shot because, presidential elections are just so unpredictable.
Obviously, right?
Yeah, obviously. That's right.
Gubernatorial ones can be too.
That's right. They can be too. And I speak from firsthand experience. But look, one of the things that I've always admired about O'Malley is that he has all the essential ingredients to be a real leader in this business. And what do I mean by that? He's got a strong handle on policy. He's a student of policy. He's a good communicator, and I'm not talking about just spewing rhetoric, but he understands how to, take policy and goals and objectives and communicate it in a way that people understand at every level. So he's a good communicator. He's good on politics, and whether you like that P word or not, politics is when you get people with different views and perspectives and interests, and you get them to see the common ground. Because I do believe that there's common ground and consensus to be found on every issue, even the most difficult issues, and you got to be good in politics. So I think he's good in policy. I think he's good in communications. I think he's good in politics. When it comes to running a campaign, I think he's demonstrated some extraordinary abilities there as well. He's a field operator. He knows how to assemble a good field team, and so. Look, 2020 is a long way off, and it's my sense, and I've had conversations with him. I haven't asked him the direct question, "Are you running in 2020?" But it would appear to me that the Democratic Party.
No one visits Iowa accidentally.
Yeah, and the Democratic Party. Look, we've got a lot of good people. We got a good bench, and Martin O'Malley certainly on the bench, and ought to be considered to be on the field in 2020.
Actually, but that's my concern, and we were talking about that on the way over as well. And we were talking about the election, and I just said, it was funny that the three contenders for the last election were all 70. And as much as you could laugh at the Republican clown car, which we did, which was you had 50 candidates up on stage. But that said, there was, Cruz and Rubio, they're all early 40s, mid 40s. They actually have the Republicans, for all their failings, and there were a lot, but they did have a bench. When you looked at the Democratic bench, that's where you get concerned because you still have Nancy Pelosi and you have Schumer. And are you concerned that there's not enough young people that are coming up? And by young, I mean, you're late 30s, so, but you have people who are coming up in their 40s and early 50s and looking for national office. But it seems like it's much older in the Democratic Party. Are they crowding out some of the up-and-comers? Because I don't see that happening on the Republican side. That's one of the, because I thought they would get thrashed and they'd have their moment in the wilderness where they had to say, Quo Vadis, where are we going? Where are we now? But that's where the Democrats are now.
Yeah. Look, I think, we stay with Martin O'Malley. I mean, he's in his
I would see him.
Mid-50s.
I put him in that younger.
Yeah, he's younger crew, and there may be some others that'll rise again. We're at the beginning of a presidential administration. I mean, a few months away from an election. A lot is going to develop over time. I don't want to speculate as to who's going to emerge and who isn't, but we've got some talent in the Democratic Party of all ages, and so I'm confident that look, my first focus now when it comes to politics is the midterm elections. Historically, I think history is on our side, and a first-term president usually loses seats in a midterm election. President Trump's given us a lot to work with, so I think we should pick up considerable gains in the House. I think the Senate's going to be more challenging. We can pick up some seats there, but we also have a lot to defend in the Senate. Senate. But I think, my first focus is the midterm elections. I think we'll do well. And then I think come, 2018, let's come, mid-November 2018, let's go ahead and shift our focus to what that 2020 race looks like.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, let's start to wrap up here because I know you've got Lieutenant Governor Rutherford coming in soon, but what else is on Congressman Brown's mind right now in the last couple minutes that we have? We're going to put the information on how to best contact you in your constituent offices, both here and in Annapolis, here in Largo, in our notes on the show. But what's on your mind?
So some of the things that I want to focus on as a new member of Congress, and I think an area where we should be able to find some bipartisan consensus is around workforce development. And career technology education. We used to call that VOTEC in our public schools, in our schools generally. It's something that I was pursuing as lieutenant governor. It was a central theme of my gubernatorial campaign, and that is offering alternatives to high school students who may not necessarily be looking at a 4-year college immediately upon graduating. And are we providing them with the skills, the background, the experience, the foundation to do something after high school short of going to college? I think some numbers suggest that 35% of the jobs that will be created in our economy don't require a 4-year degree, but certainly require something more than a high school diploma. And I can think of areas like auto mechanics. I can think about a lot of the allied health professions. These are jobs that you can't outsource around the globe. And we're going to need graduates from our high schools who've got the aptitude and the interest and the preparation to be able to take on these jobs. So one of the things I'll be looking at as a new member of Congress and working across the aisle, because I've identified a number of new members in Congress that have similar interests, is to find ways that we can not only find or make greater investments in public education, because investments are hard to come by nowadays with our tightening budgets, but how do we leverage partnerships with industry, with labor, partnerships between high schools and community colleges to use existing resources to provide those types of programs and opportunities for high school students.
And that was your area of expertise when you were in office, was the public-private partnerships.
Public-private partnerships, right. And while often we think about public-private partnerships for infrastructure investments, there's also public-private partnerships when it comes to workforce development. And
internships is a perfect example of that.
Internships is perfect, and it's not just the building trades. I was speaking with a number of defense contractors, and we were talking about this idea, and I had floated the idea that perhaps when we look at federal contracting with defense contractors, that we give a priority or certainly some preference points to those contractors who include in their bids a workforce development component. And much to my surprise, many of them already do. Not all of them do, and I think we can do more to incentivize that. But essentially saying, hey, look, if you're a large defense contractor, you want to build an aircraft carrier for the United States Navy, then let's make sure that in your program you've got workforce development that's working with our community colleges, our high schools, developing that pipeline, providing opportunities for those who otherwise may not have an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the areas that I've been focused on. It's a long-term project, but I've asked my staff to begin looking at that. Fantastic.
Well, I thank you very much for your time. If you need lunch company for you and the Lieutenant Governor, we are available.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to so Boyd Rutherford's coming in, and I certainly commend him for stepping up to serve the people of Maryland. And today we're actually going to talk about base realignment and closure. That was one of my big priorities in 2005. And while there's not another BRAC round that's on the table, I personally think that we ought to be in another BRAC round. There's a lot of equity in the Department of Defense that we can put to good use. And I know that Boyd is interested in making sure that Maryland is ready for any rounds of BRAC that we might see in the not-too-distant future.
We'll go get them.
Okay.
Hey, Congressman, thank you very much.
All right, good deal.
Thanks.
When it comes to diamonds, there are two things that matter: reputation and value. At Zachary's, you know our reputation. We pride ourselves on providing the best experience for every customer every day, because we wouldn't be here without you. But what you might not know is that Zachary's is the only diamond importer in Annapolis. We cut a check for $500,000 and deal directly with the De Beers site holder to bring you the best quality diamonds. That's just one step away from a mine. So by the time a diamond gets to your hands, only 2 people have touched it, not 6. I'm Steve Samaras, and at Zachary's, we've spent decades cultivating relationships around the world to ensure we can offer the best value on a diamond. But the relationships we value most are the ones we create with our customers right here in town.
Zachary's, online at zacharysjewelers.com. If it's a diamond, we're a good place to start.
That's my impression of our transition. So we just had...
You know, you do it better.
I do it much better. Well, we're back.
Congressman Anthony Brown.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Nice guy. He was hobbling around the office, man. Did you see him in his cane? He
hurt his
looked
back.
Looked like 100 years old. No. He was actually on a congressional trip to the Middle East, into UAE and everything else, and he had a pinched nerve, which I know you said you've had a hard time with sometimes.
I had it once, like a year and a half ago, and that was exquisite. That pain, I cannot begin to tell you. You know, childbirth?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Way to piss off all the women, Tim. But no, Congressman Brown had said that it pinched, I guess, last Thursday, and he said it was pretty debilitating for him, and the dude is in shape.
Yeah,
I mean,
what'd you say between him and O'Malley?
Him and O'Malley were the most in shape governor, lieutenant governor combination in Maryland history.
Well, I had I'm
just guessing.
Yeah, but when I lived in New Mexico, my governor, Gary Johnson, so he was like a triathlete, and he was like super in shape too. But he was no Chris Christie, mind you.
But, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, with Congressman Brown, man, he really jumped right into it. I mean, the guy is a freshman congressman, as we pointed out. He was just elected in November.
And also, and we didn't get to this part because we ran out of time, we were going to talk about he's on the executive, not board, but he's an executive member of the Congressional African American Caucus. And they met with President Trump last month, about 3 weeks ago. And we just ran out of time before we could talk about that. But I mean, he's an executive member of that, him and 4 other African American members of Congress, and so they met last. That's a big jump for a freshman, you know. But I mean, he knows what he's doing. I mean, he really does. I mean, he's got the legislative experience with the House of Delegates here in Maryland. He's obviously got the executive experience as lieutenant governor. Now he's working on the legislative. I often wonder, because we didn't talk too much about it. Again, if we had more time, there's a lot of stuff we want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about his gubernatorial race, just because to me it was very low key, and I think maybe a lot of assumptions were made, especially when you were coming off an incumbency. And Martin O'Malley his popularity had suffered towards the end there. The polls, he had taken a hit for various reasons.
I'm thinking about that. We've mentioned before that no mayor of Annapolis has ever gone on to higher office.
Right.
And I do not know of a lieutenant governor of Maryland that has ever ascended into the governorship.
No. But if you look at, I've sent an email to him, and I'm going to send another one, is Mike Steele.
Right.
Who was our lieutenant governor under
Bob
Ehrlich, and he went on to become the chair of the RNC. Really sharp guy, really good. I'd like to get him in here, but I mean, you would argue that going to the leader of the Republican Party it's
higher
a step
office.
up.
Oh, sure, certainly, and I mean, I think Anthony Brown probably, in the long run, can do a little bit better for us and for his constituents in Washington than potentially 4 or 8 years in Maryland. I don't know. We'll see.
I always wondered when you're, let's say that you're in Maryland or Virginia. I mean, when your recess gets out and everyone goes back to their home districts, you kind of stay behind. You're like that college student that doesn't go home for Christmas break or Thanksgiving.
Right.
You're just in the dorms; they're all empty. Alone.
It doesn't seem to be that way with him, though. I mean, he came right out of the box saying that he's fulfilled a campaign promise to make sure that, because he does represent a good portion of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, that he opened an office in there. And one thing that struck me about the whole conversation with Congressman Brown is that he appears to be very bipartisan. He had Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford coming in.
By the way, we ran into him right before Christmas when we were interviewing Governor Hogan. And we chatted for a few minutes, and we were talking about our Montgomery County connections, which John hates when I bring it up, and the schools and everything.
Anyone find my bike yet?
But he looked startled when John said, "Hey, Lieutenant Governor," and he actually took a step back. And he was surrounded by cops too.
It was funny. It was funny.
He looked bewildered.
As was the look on the receptionist in the congressman's office as we roll in the front door with a wheel case, and Tim's carrying like a mixer and this electronic stuff. And she's got this like, okay, this is my... She goes, Jesus, I'm coming home.
She goes, what's all this? Like we just wandered in off the street in Upper Marlboro.
But but it was. But what I found that he was very bipartisan, if you will. He talked about he's opening. They're putting the finishing touches on an Anne Arundel County office, which is going to be in the county office complex, which is right on Riva Road in the 2660-246
across from Squisito and
and he said he worked with Steve Shue, a Republican, who championed for Governor Hogan, the guy that defeated him.
Right. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
To get an office to work with the constituents. So I think this really speaks well for both Steve Shue.
Yeah, we talked about that on the way back. Is that he's not ex-military because he's still he's a colonel in the Army Reserves, and he won the Bronze Star in Iraq, and so he's military, and same with John Astle. We were talking about that. Is that they're Democrats, but I've never known anyone who hasn't been in the military or a police officer and hasn't at least leaned right. I'm not saying that they're conservative.
They're far right.
Yeah,
they're not a Tea Party.
I've never seen anyone who's military lean left. So we talked a little bit about the military and the military defense budget and what have you, and I really wanted to talk about North Korea. That's something that I've been obsessed with this week, and I wanted to talk to him about that.
There have been a couple good podcasts that I've listened to. The Daily, which is a New York Times produced podcast, was really good on that. And I agree. I would have loved to have had some more time with that. But the congressman had called us to ask whether we could talk with him, but they only had a half hour. We typically like to get an hour out of everybody. But,
right.
And with Governor Hogan, we milked that half hour a little bit, but that was...
we tried to leave, and he's like, I'm not done yet. I'm like, we'll stay then, sir. The best part, too, is that so we're at the congressman's office, and we're sitting there, and he's got the meeting with Lieutenant Governor next. And they were running late, so we had to wait a half hour, which is not a big deal because I don't have a life.
I was put off.
My wife and kids are sick, so I could sit there all day. And so we're sitting there, and they have this really tiny conference room that's really cramped. And so we go and we set up, or we wait for a half hour because they're running a half hour behind. And we go and we set up, and we wait for a couple minutes, and he comes in and we do the podcast. But while we're doing the podcast, I'm looking out the window, and there's the Lieutenant Governor sitting in the waiting room, just like we were, just waiting. And the congressman gets up after he shakes our hands and he walks back to his office. But the lieutenant governor is still waiting out there and with his police protection. But it was just funny to see the lieutenant governor just kind of sitting out there.
Just hanging out there. Well, hey, he puts his pants on the same way we all do.
He jumps into him 2 feet off the bed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I thought the conversation about the EPA was also very interesting.
I guess so, but you know what? I didn't have high expectations because just so people know, like they had some suggestions of things that they wanted to talk about. Not that we had to, but the EPA is something that, and the Chesapeake Bay is something that we wanted to jump into. But I don't know what you can say at that point. I think I was saying that the one thing I do find somewhat refreshing about Trump, and there's not a whole. I'm not a Trump fan, obviously. Obviously because. One thing I do like is that I like decorum to some extent. I like the fact that you have a president who acts presidential, but sometimes I like someone who just says something that's honest instead of giving you the political doublespeak. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that the congressman did, but what else are you going to say? The Bay is important to us. We're hoping in the future. I mean, but he's not going to say, screw him. What we're going to do is we're going to shut this down until we get the money back. It's just, I don't think there's any definitive thing that we can do. I think I was joking about how many Mar-a-Lagos go into the Bay, but I mean that's if you look at all the cuts that have been made to the budget, they're all relatively small things. Just a few million, like endowments to the arts, which I'm not a big fan of in general. But I mean, Meals on Wheels, which has been the big ticket item that's gotten the most attention.
Sure,
but these are all things that are so small they don't make a difference unless you're talking about tens or hundreds of billions of dollars. It doesn't make a difference, and I think he made that point when he and Governor O'Malley went through the Maryland budget. That there really wasn't that much that they could cut out. That you think you find things, but in the end you find out that it's pretty streamlined. Now, I don't know if that's true because he's been in public office for a long time.
Sure.
And I think when you're in public office, you tend to look at money differently than those of us in the private industry.
Yeah.
And what is streamlined.
Well, it's not their money per se.
Right.
That they have to do that. But I think it was very interesting that he was talking about Governor O'Malley, about his time in the state capitol here in Maryland, and how it was all about you may find the small things to cut, but it's all about communications. It's all about
the optics of it.
Letting them know where my mindset is. Why did I cut this? And this is something I don't think Trump has necessarily done. Why did I cut the $78 million from the Bay?
Because he doesn't know. I'm not being flip.
I agree with you.
We have a president, and again,
maybe it was low-hanging fruit. I don't know.
I'm not picking on the president because I had problems with President Obama too, some pretty big ones. All I'm saying is that we have a president who really doesn't have a fundamental grasp of civics and how government works. And some people might find that refreshing, but then it also leads to a lot of situations that can be potentially catastrophic. For example, after he sent that tweet out about President Obama wiretapping him, he had to ask what the FISA court did. And that's something that probably a presidential candidate should know before he's elected. But that said, does he have a point about government bloat? Yeah, he actually does. So if you look at the $78 million, and we're all traumatized in Maryland because we're like, oh my God, we lost all this money that was cleaning up the bay. How much of that really was going to clean up the bay? Like if we looked at a line item of that, could we have gotten as much use out of $50 million? Or was there any bloat in there? I'm not saying there was.
Or did we need $200 million?
What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to be a little more clinical about
pragmatic
about a Trump presidency. What that means is he's not wrong. I agree with him on a few things. I agree with him on NAFTA. I agree with him on TPP.
There's a few things. It's the way they go about it. And one thing that we talked about today earlier that was not recorded is Trump coming around. And we briefly touched on that with Congressman Brown. Is Trump coming around? Is this now a president that the Democrats can work with?
Well, yeah, we had a great conversation out there. And my observation was if you look at one man's flip-flop is another man's changing his mind because he gets different facts. He made all these wild promises and during the primaries and during the debates. I'm just stammering this out. But what it was like, he's going to call China a manipulator of currency. He was going to do all these things. But I think once you get there and you're president, and on your orientation day, they're like, oh, here's how everything is. All of a sudden you see how. Oh, yeah, exactly. And I think that's where he is that he's seeing a lot of the things that I don't know if it's flip flopping. And you can point your finger and say, oh, he's flip flopping, or you can be relieved that he's coming around to what's sensible.
And again, this is something that Governor Hogan has discovered. This is something that Mayor Mike Panelides of Annapolis has discovered. They come in that's not a career politician and comes in and says, well, I'm going to do this and this and this. And Mike Panelides, I'm going to sweep City Hall clean. And okay, so that didn't happen too much.
But it never does. I'm not being cynical, right. But there's a lot of light between the campaign promises and the way things actually are when you get up against the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy is a very strong thing. But I think, you make these promises, I'm going to drain the swamp, sweep the city clean, all these things. People say that we're going to take all the things that people hate out of politics or hate about politics out of politics. You can't, because that's what got you elected.
That's the definition of politics.
I'm not bagging on anybody for that. I know some of the people who've run for the best possible reasons, and you get caught up in the way the system is.
Another thing I really noticed about Congressman Brown, we came in and everything was running a little bit late. We came in, there were two gentlemen. He was in the conference room with a group of people.
Right.
There were two gentlemen sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
Or the chairs opposite us. We sat down on the, looking like slobs, sitting down on the couch.
No, I'm dressed nicely for once.
Yeah, I look like a slob.
You do.
Yeah. Which is fine. And, but he was very much reaching out to constituent services. There were two or three other people that came in.
Yeah.
That picked up, one woman picked up a bag of books or something, or pamphlets, it looked like, from one of his aides. He's there to meet people. He's, which I can't say the same for some of the other congressmen.
Well, I guess, but you know what? This is where cynical Tim takes over. Is that for example, I talked about him briefly. Bill, not John Murtha, but
Andy Harris.
No. Oh shit, Western PA. Bill.
I don't know.
I know, but everyone look. Congress, I think their approval rate's 12%, but everyone loves their congressman, because this is when you press the flush, you get together. But everyone loves their congressman because that's what you do. You meet with them when you're in recess and you come back to your constituents, and so everyone's like, I hate Congress. Well, except for my congressman, he's great, but the rest of them suck. That's why I think that the incumbency, the re-election rate among incumbents is something around 91%.
Right. Well, you look. I mean, I think the guy opens his office. He's there. He's accessible.
Bud Schuster.
Okay. He's promised an office in Anne Arundel County, which was not before. Now Anne Arundel Countyans, I don't know if that's a word, can go down to Annapolis and see him, see some of his constituents, people, when he's in there. Obviously, he can't be in three places at once. So I think it's a good, solid step in the right direction. I do laud him for that.
I wonder, look, we were wondering aloud about Martin O'Malley, if he's going to run, and we know you listen to Mr. O'Malley, so if you want to come on the show, we cordially invite you. You can bring your guitar and we'll have a sing-along.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Irish songs. I was raised on that stuff.
But you have to have beer. Not a problem.
Nope.
Been there, done that.
The old
Do it again.
9 a.m. beer interview. So,
but yeah, no, I mean, Congressman Brown is a fan of Martin O'Malley.
Yeah,
I mean, he
well,
was,
he'd have to be.
You know, he threw it out there. He said, I mean, one comment they said, you know, he's one of the best environmental governors of Maryland has ever had.
So again, if you're running for any office in Maryland, I don't care if it's Prince George's County, if it's Howard County, Montgomery County, Anne Arundel County,
Frederick, Hagerstown,
Eastern
Allegheny.
Shore, Oakland, Maryland. I'm obsessed with Oakland, Maryland.
I don't know why.
I love that little town. It's like way as far west as you can get in Maryland without being in whatever's over there, Kentucky.
Let's talk about it. Let's find out what's important to you guys.
Yeah. So, but if you're running for elected office, you are cordially invited to be on the podcast.
Absolutely.
And so just
if you're running for president in 2020, you are also cordially invited to become on the podcast
and announce on here. How cool would that be if someone announced on our podcast? That'd be like kind of a.
I can do that. I'll run.
That's stole the thunder.
Hey, Larry Bradshaw. Not related to Carrie Bradshaw.
Or Terry Bradshaw.
Or Terry Bradshaw. This is Larry Bradshaw. And he is the CEO and president of the National Lutheran Community. I screwed it. NCLS. The people that are going to be bringing the village at Providence Point, perhaps, to Annapolis, Maryland. That is the reincarnation of Crystal Spring, the much downscaled from what we
And we're going to go to my old neighborhood, like a block away from where I grew up.
Where's that, Montgomery County?
That's Montgomery County.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It's actually in Rockville. We're going to be speaking with him, and he will be on next Thursday.
That's Bethesda still, where he is.
And we're looking forward to hearing what they have to do, because I mean they've got a really uphill battle to fight there, because the NIMBYs, the tree huggers, whatever you want to call them, the opponents of that development on the property, their position is nothing.
Well, but that's a small vocal contingent, and there's people like me who are saying, look, it's fine, just don't stack up my traffic.
Yeah. So we're going to see what their plans are. We're going to hear it from that side. And if you're interested in development in the peninsula of Annapolis, this is something that you're going to want to tune into.
Yep. Okay. So in the meantime, you can find us on the Maryland Crabs. We have a group. We have a page on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at MD Crabs Podcast. You can find John at Annapolis. You can find me at Tim Hamilton 47. You can send us an email, info@themarylandcrabs.com. You can subscribe to us on Apple, iTunes, on Google Play. You can find us on Alexis. You can find us soon on...
We're on Stitcher. We're on
iHeart. Yeah, you cannot avoid us. We are not afraid of a restraining order.
And we're going to start tagging those little signs on the side of the road, like for Jerry Subs and Pizza. ROW, it's code. It's code for listen to the Maryland Crabs. It's subliminal.
It's a stupid code. All right, until next week.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.